Usually when we look at ancient history, there's this expectation of monumental inevitability.
Oh, totally. Like it was all just set in stone from the start.
Right. You look at the pyramids, these massive stone structures, and you just assume the people who built them were just as rigid.
Untouchable, basically.
Exactly. We like our ancient myths clean, heroes, villains, untouchable gods. It's a really comforting way to view the past.
But I mean, step into the actual world of human ambition and personal faith and systemic corruption, and that solid stone shatters almost instantly.
It really does. Which is why today we are taking a deep dive into The Hebrew Secret by Marin Cyrus.
Such a good book.
It's incredible. It really forces us to look closely at the cracks in that historical stone. And for anyone tracking the wider universe she's building, this is book 1 of the Priestess of Egypt Trilogy.
Right, and what makes this deep dive so compelling is how she takes a really familiar ancient narrative, the biblical story of Joseph, and radically reframes the entire power dynamic.
Yeah, because we aren't just following Joseph's desperate survival this time.
No, we are experiencing this massive, super intimidating empire through the eyes of Asenath, the daughter of an Egyptian high priest.
Which shifts the center of gravity of the narrative entirely.
It really does. And Marin Cyrus is famous for doing exactly this,
Oh, for sure. Like she did with the Book of Job in her Reckoning trilogy.
Exactly. And the story of Esther in her Esther series, she takes these ancient, often super patriarchal texts and turns them into modern-feeling, deeply psychological epics.
Featuring these fiercely complex women who are navigating highly dangerous political landscapes.
It's just so well done. The Hebrew Secret perfectly blends cutthroat political scheming, a profound clash of ancient philosophies, and, well, a forbidden romance.
A romance that actually challenges the very foundations of the Egyptian empire, I might add.
Right. So to understand how these two vastly different worlds collide, Joseph's world of nomadic faith and Asenath's world of rigid imperial power, we have to look at the uninvited visions that shattered their comfortable realities in the first place.
That's a great point, because both of our protagonists are completely isolated from their families by unsolicited divine revelations.
So let's begin with Joseph. His origins in Canaan paint a picture of, well, severe familial dysfunction.
Oh, man, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the favored son of the patriarch Jacob, gifted with that famous, shimmering, intricate coat of many colors.
Which, that garment alone marks him as distinctly separate from his brothers.
Right, because his brothers are out there doing the back-breaking, unglamorous labor in the fields, wearing simple, rough woolen tunics.
And he makes the situation infinitely worse with his dreams.
He really does. He shares these incredibly vivid, prophetic visions with the very brothers he's actively alienating.
Like the one where they were binding sheaves of grain, and his brother's sheaves gather around his and bow down.
And then later he tells them the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing to him.
I mean, reading this, his naivety is almost painful. It is exactly like a naive, privileged kid casually bragging about a massive trust fund on social media.
Oh, that is such a good analogy.
Right, like bragging about a sudden inheritance directly to people who are struggling to pay their rent and facing eviction.
That really highlights the sheer lack of situational awareness. I mean, Joseph believes that because a dream is divinely inspired, it is automatically a gift to be shared like a family treasure.
He completely fails to calculate the political danger of his own truth.
Exactly. He is totally oblivious to the decades of bitter resentment bubbling up in his older brothers.
So from a human psychology standpoint, his brother's violent reaction, throwing him in a pit and selling him to Ishmaelite traders for 20 pieces of silver, is absolutely tragic.
It's horrific, but as you said, it is also entirely predictable.
Yeah, he has to learn the hard way that not every truth needs to be spoken immediately.
And while Joseph's world is being violently dismantled hundreds of miles away in Heliopolis, Asenath is experiencing a completely different kind of shattering.
Right, she is the high priestess of Ra.
And her life isn't just orderly, it is steeped in the absolute rigid control of temple ritual.
Every hour of her day is dictated by tradition. I mean, from what she wears to how she breathes during prayers.
Until a sacred morning offering disrupts everything. While she's anointing the altar, she is struck by a violent, disjointed vision.
It's completely unbidden and just totally alien to her structured world.
She sees a bound non-Egyptian slave with a throat torn by grief.
And the visceral nature of it ravels her so deeply that she actually breaks protocol.
Yeah, she secretly sketches his face that night in her private prayer chamber.
Which leads us directly to the Memphis marketplace.
Yeah.
The physical collision of these two visions.
The atmospheric details Cyrus uses here are just fantastic, aren't they?
Oh, they're incredible. You can practically smell the air like roasting lamb fat and crushed myrrh.
And Asenath is walking through the market, surrounded by her retinue of temple servants. She is completely untouchable.
Then, a line of chained captives from an Ishmaelite caravan is marched right through her path.
She turns, and the inevitable happens.
When they lock eyes in that marketplace, it's not just dramatic tension. She recognizes the face from her vision, obviously.
But it's how he reacts that really seals the deal.
Yes. I was so struck by the fact that he refuses to break her gaze. I mean, he is bleeding, covered in the dust of the desert, bound in iron chains, yet he looks right through the gold collar of a high priestess.
He absolutely refuses to bow his head.
It's this profound moment of mutual recognition.
He sees the woman beneath the priestess, and she sees the dignity beneath the slave.
However, as beautiful as that is, eye contact, no matter how profound, doesn't unpick an iron shackle.
No, it definitely doesn't. Joseph is still property, and he has to survive in a staggeringly hostile new world.
And his specific survival strategy is what makes his rapid rise in Potiphar's estate so fascinating to read.
He's sold to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard, and he doesn't survive by brute strength or military prowess.
Not at all. He survives through extreme competence.
He's literate, he understands logistics, numbers, and honestly, most importantly, human nature.
He essentially weaponizes administration.
That's a perfect way to put it. The details here are just meticulous, like that brilliant scene where Joseph orchestrates a dinner party for 3 highly influential palace officials.
Oh, I loved that part. Because in ancient Egyptian elite circles, a dinner party wasn't just a meal.
No, it was a high-stakes diplomatic battlefield. Fortunes were made or lost based on perceived slights and subtle posturing.
So he doesn't just order the kitchen to make food. He carefully selects Theban red wine to represent traditional excellence.
And the Delta White for the fish course.
Yes. He even adjusts the seating arrangements, which is so clever.
He gives the security chief, Kent Case, a firmer cushion because he observed the man shifting uncomfortably from an old battle wound.
Just incredibly observant. And he gives the diplomat, Senenmut, the good silver cups because he noticed the man appreciates fine metalwork.
He is literally engineering their comfort to manipulate their favor toward his master.
It is administrative brilliance as a form of diplomacy. He creates an environment of absolute perfection.
And this is deeply ironic, really, because the prevailing Egyptian philosophy at the time is Ma'at, the concept of divine balance, truth, and order.
Right. And Asenath's father, Potiphar, who is the high priest of On, uses Ma'at to explain the entire structure of the universe to her. Which I have to say I push back hard on this whole idea of Ma'at as it's presented by Potiphar.
Oh, absolutely, because he tells Asenath that slavery and suffering are just part of correcting cosmic imbalance.
It's so messed up. He points to the Nile flooding on time, the sun rising predictably, and claims that if the physical world is orderly, the social hierarchy must be divinely mandated too.
He literally says that foreigners are outside of Ma'at, so their suffering doesn't register on the moral scales.
When I was reading this, I was thinking, isn't divine order just a highly convenient philosophical excuse for the elite to justify ignoring the suffering of the lower classes?
That is exactly what it is.
It sounds exactly like an ancient precursor to the just world fallacy, where the rich convince themselves they are rich because they are inherently good, and the poor are poor because they are morally flawed.
And that realization is the exact ideological crisis Asenath is beginning to experience.
Right, because Ma'at, as wielded by her father, just maintains the status quo.
If you are wealthy and powerful, the gods favor you, therefore you are righteous. If you are a slave in chains, you must deserve it to balance the cosmic scales.
It leaves absolutely no room for mercy and no room for systemic critique.
Which perfectly frames that beautifully tense conversation they have by the well at Potiphar's agricultural estate.
That scene is so good. Asenath and Joseph finally have a moment to truly speak, away from the rigid hierarchy and listening ears of the main house.
She is stunned to find this level of philosophical depth in a household administrator.
They discuss the nature of divine purpose, and Joseph introduces a radical counter-idea to Ma'at.
He suggests that perhaps divine will works through human hands rather than replacing human effort or dictating a static, unchangeable hierarchy.
Yeah, he views his meticulous work, even as an enslaved person, as a way of actively creating order and prosperity out of chaos, rather than just accepting his lot in life as cosmic balance.
He introduces her to the concept of a God who actually cares about the individual.
A God of radical mercy rather than rigid, unfeeling, transactional balance. For Asenath, it is a complete paradigm shift.
But here's the tragic irony of Joseph's situation. His extreme competence and his unshakable integrity are exactly what draw Asenath to him. Yet in the Shark Tank of Egyptian politics, those exact same traits paint a massive target on his back.
Visibility is incredibly dangerous. Doing the right thing often severely punishes the one doing it, especially in a corrupt system.
And this brings us to the two primary antagonists of the narrative, starting with Amenemem.
Oh, Amenemheb is terrifying because he is so deeply calculating. He isn't some cartoon villain. He's a self-made monster.
He is an ambitious slave trader turned political schemer, and his background explains his ruthlessness so well.
He's the son of a poor date seller, right?
Yeah, he watched his father fail and be crushed by the elite, so he clawed his way to power through leverage, extortion, and fear.
He maintains this secret ledger, tracking everyone's weaknesses, debts, and indiscretions. Amenemheb isn't just a schemer. He's essentially running an ancient intelligence agency.
That secret ledger is basically his version of a digital blackmail file.
He understands that in a society obsessed with outward perfection and ma'at, the most valuable currency isn't gold, it's leverage.
Exactly. And when he sees Joseph, another foreigner, rising from absolutely nothing, it threatens his entire worldview.
I kept thinking of them as two sides of the exact same coin. Both started with nothing, down in the dust.
But where Amenemheb looks at the world and decides to use extortion and control to build his empire, Joseph uses service, trust, and integrity.
It is an epic battle of toxic ambition versus radical integrity. And that battle is further complicated by our second antagonist.
Kimwaset, Potiphar's highly manipulative wife.
Her psychology is incredibly dark, but Cyrus writes it with enough nuance that you actually understand the mechanics of her damage. She isn't just evil for the sake of it.
She is a product of her environment. She was married off at 16 to Potiphar, a man much older and entirely consumed by his military and political duties.
Women in her position had wealth, but absolutely no outlets for their intellect or ambition.
Right. She realizes very quickly that she is merely a purchased, decorative object in her own marriage. Her husband ignores her.
She has no real agency in the broader political sphere. So she seeks power and validation through the one domain she can control: the household staff.
Specifically, the chief steward, Joseph.
She wants to break his integrity to prove she has power over him. It's entirely about control and a twisted form of intellectual stimulation.
There's that deeply uncomfortable foot-washing scene where she is deliberately crossing boundaries.
Playing this toxic game of cat and mouse, testing how far she can push a man who literally cannot say no without risking his life.
And Joseph's response is to maintain an unwavering professional distance. He refuses to play the game, which deeply wounds her pride.
A wounded ego armed with absolute domestic power is a lethal combination.
It all culminates in that terrifying climax in the master's study.
Oh, when she traps him there when the house is empty, she physically grabs his tunic.
And when he pulls away, choosing his integrity over her demands, the linen tears, leaving a strip of fabric in her hand.
And she doesn't miss a beat. She walks right out into the courtyard, holds up the torn fabric to the entire household, and loudly, falsely accuses him of assault.
She completely leverages the inherent racial and class biases of the Egyptian staff against the Hebrew slave to ensure her lie becomes the official truth.
It highlights the paradox of righteousness in a broken world. He flees from sin, he honors his master's trust, and his reward is the royal prison.
He is sent to the dungeon under the watchful eye of Num, the chief jailer.
This is Joseph's lowest point. And Cyrus doesn't gloss over the despair here. We see him pacing his cell in the dark, his knuckles bleeding from hitting stone walls, crying out to his God.
He's asking the hardest, most universal question of faith, isn't he?
Absolutely. I did everything you asked. I obeyed. I maintained my integrity. Why does obedience to divine law only bring me ruin?
It's the ultimate test. Will he still trust a God who seemingly allows him to be buried alive?
And while Joseph's physical world shrinks to the size of a damp, lightless dungeon cell, Asenath's spiritual world is ironically doing the exact same thing up in the vast gilded halls of the temple.
Right, because with Joseph gone, the temple rituals she once found comforting now feel entirely hollow.
The silence of the Egyptian gods, who seemingly allowed a righteous man to be unjustly imprisoned, becomes deafening to her.
She's reciting the ancient chants, pouring the sacred lotus oil, but the mechanics of her faith have completely broken down.
And then she finds this ancient, dusty Phoenician scroll in the temple library.
It's dusty because Egypt was notoriously insular, often rejecting foreign ideas, so finding it represents her breaking through imperial propaganda.
It describes a singular, invisible god. And the concept of an invisible god is actually a radical technological leap in theology here.
Think about it. In Egypt, gods are statues.
Right. You feed them, you clothe them, you can physically control them by locking the temple doors. An invisible god can't be contained by the state.
And this scroll describes a god who doesn't just weigh your heart on a cosmic scale after you die, but who knows the individual while they are living.
That word knows changes everything for her. It implies a god of personal relationship, not just transactional offerings.
Which made me wonder throughout the second half of the book, does Asenath actually fall in love with Joseph the man, or is she falling in love with the spiritual freedom and the radical mercy that his God represents?
That is such a good question.
Yeah.
I'd argue they become inextricably linked for her.
Because Joseph embodies the theology he professes.
Exactly. His calm under pressure, his refusal to bow to corruption, his actual lived integrity, that is the empirical evidence of his God's reality to her. To love the man is to embrace the philosophy that forged him.
And she proves that embrace with incredibly dangerous action. She doesn't just sit in the temple and mourn his absence.
No, she takes her mother's gold jewelry and sells it piece by piece on the black market.
Which is a staggering risk for a high priestess.
She uses that gold to bribe the royal prison guards. She is risking her priesthood, her family's reputation, and her literal life to descend into that rotting, disease-filled dungeon just to see him.
And when she gets there, she brings him a gift. Not gold, not food, but a clumsily carved wooden bird.
A bird she carved herself, using a bronze knife, cutting her own hands in the process because she had never done manual labor a day in her life.
It's this incredibly visceral symbol of hope and freedom. She presses it into his hands in the dark, and it clearly means more to him than anything he ever owned in his father's house.
It's so moving. But she can't stay in the dungeon. She has to return to the surface to the temple and pretend nothing has changed.
Which is where the wisdom of her Ethiopian servant, Hagar, becomes crucial. Hagar teaches Asenath the mechanics of survival as a subversive.
I love Hagar. She tells her, they own your body, they don't own your prayers.
So Asenath learns she can still wear the white robes, she can still offer comfort to the common people who genuinely rely on her in the temple, while secretly praying to Joseph's God in her heart.
It's the birth of a quiet, internal revolution. Meanwhile, down in the dark, Joseph isn't just rotting away.
No, he begins to apply that same administrative brilliance to his captivity.
Cyrus explained how he starts organizing the chaotic food distribution among the prisoners, ensuring the weak aren't starved out by the strong.
He starts mediating violent disputes between inmates using his principles of radical mercy and de-escalation, rather than the guards' method of brutal beatings.
Even in a literal hole in the ground, he is creating pockets of order and justice.
He reshapes the prison ecosystem from the inside out, making himself utterly indispensable to the chief jailer.
So, as Book 1 wraps up, the antagonists think they've won. Amenemheb is reviewing his intelligence ledgers, confident the Hebrew threat is neutralized.
Potiphar's house is quiet. Kamwaset's secret seems permanently buried in the dungeon.
Yet the foundation of their world is entirely compromised. Above ground, Asenath is quietly dismantling the ideological justifications of her own priesthood.
And the book ends with a massive shift in power dynamics at the very top of the empire.
It's such a brilliant setup. Pharaoh has a nightmare, a terrifying, vivid dream that none of his magicians, priests, or wise men can interpret.
The entire intellectual apparatus of Egypt is stumped.
And suddenly, the royal cupbearer, who had previously spent time in the royal prison and witnessed Joseph's unique abilities, remembers a certain Hebrew prisoner.
Pharaoh utters two words, "Bring him."
The collision of these worlds is about to reach the throne room of Egypt itself, launching us directly into Book 2, The Pharaoh's Nightmare.
It takes a story we think we know from Sunday school and turns it into a high-stakes geopolitical thriller.
Listen, if you want to see how this collision plays out, or if you want to check out Marin Cyrus's other reimagined epics, you should absolutely sign up for her newsletter.
Definitely. You can join the community of readers at subscribepage.iomedepoq.
That's subscribepage.iomedepoq.
It's an excellent resource for exclusive previews and behind-the-scenes insights into how she constructs these layered historical worlds.
So what does this all mean for us today? We've covered a lot of ground, exploring how faith and ambition shatter the illusion of a static, ancient world. But I want to leave you with a completely different thought.
Let's hear it.
In the novel, Amenhotep relies on his secret ledger, his recorded data, to control the narrative and maintain power. Today, we live in a world obsessed with our own digital ledgers.
Oh, that's so true. We track every post, every transaction, every fleeting public thought.
Right. Assuming this massive digital footprint is what will define us to future generations, we assume the loudest, most recorded voices are the ones that endure.
But Joseph and Asenath's story challenges that assumption entirely.
Exactly. Their most pivotal moments. A quiet conversation by a well, a clumsily carved wooden bird exchanged in a dark prison, a silent prayer hidden behind a golden altar. These were entirely unrecorded by the official scribes of their day.
It really leaves you wondering about our modern world.
In 1,000 years, when future historians look back at our digital footprint, will they only see the viral posts of billionaires, the official ledgers of politicians, and the loud noise of the powerful?
Or is there a way to ensure the quiet, radical integrity of everyday people actually survives the ultimate test of time?
The truest history might just be the one no one is writing down. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. See you next time.